Welcome to Cultimatum, the podcast that delves deep into the culture and complexities of cults and human trafficking. Your hosts are myself, Anonymous Andrew, and Melody. Each week we explore different facets of cult life and human trafficking.
And I'm Melody. Having experienced the trauma of a cult firsthand, specifically the House of Yahweh, I'm here as an advocate for fellow survivors. My journey has inspired me to help others who find themselves in similar situations.
Our podcast is committed to respecting our guests' privacy. To ensure their comfort and safety, our guests can choose to remain anonymous or use a fake name.
And Andrew, before we get started, we also want to issue a trigger warning. Some episodes may contain potentially disturbing subjects such as sexual abuse, rape, human trafficking, suicide, and other sensitive topics. Discretion is advised.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Anonymous Andrew, and with me is Melody. Hi, Melody.
Hi, Andrew. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Judith Castillo. She is an ex-member of a cult called La Luz del Mundo. And Judith, we originally interviewed her on Anonymous Andrew, and she was kind enough to agree to come and interview for us again on Cultimatum. And we're very excited to hear her story and let her share her experiences with us again.
Yeah, so let's welcome Judith to our show. Hi, Judith.
Thank you guys for having me back.
Yeah, thanks for coming back.
Judith is going to share her story about being in the group and how she got out and all of the background story there. So go ahead and start wherever you want to, Judith.
Hey, well, I was born and raised in this church. La Luz del Mundo in English is called the Light of the World Church. They are internationally known, 60 countries. And my parents learned about this church. It was actually through my mom first in Monterrey, Mexico. So whenever they decided to establish themselves here in Houston, they started asking around because they had told them there was a church here in Houston. And of course, they found one and practically was raised within the church. It was a very strict, especially for women. At a very young age, you have to wear long skirts. I can tell you 4 or 5 years old, you already had to wear long skirts going to school. So this brought a lot of burden to me growing up because I wanted to wear pants. I wanted to blend in like any other child, and I couldn't. Even to this day, my ears are not even pierced. I'm planning on doing it this year, but we couldn't wear jewelry. We couldn't wear makeup. We couldn't cut our hair short. And the dress code was very long skirts. You couldn't show any cleavage, of course, or anything. So it's very much like Jehovah's Witness type, but everything was the same. The only difference is that in this church, the leader of the church is a so-called apostle. And he is the mediator between your prayers and God. You have to pray and offer your prayers to him so he could take them to God and God can hear you. Pretty much, we were mind-folded and blindfolded to think that we needed a mediator in this world in order for our prayers to be heard. And that is the apostolic revelation that in 1926, Eusebio Joaquin received in Monterrey, that he was to be the leader of this church. And he, in his revelation, he established himself and he had to get a pilgrimage all the way to Guadalajara, Mexico. And in Guadalajara, Mexico, God revealed that that was the place that he had to establish and settle the church. And so he did, he established the church. He started doing a lot of evangelical preachings on streets. And sure enough, the church became, and the curiosity about it is that they will go to the humble people that are illiterate, people that had no educational background, people that were easily able to manipulate. So they would establish themselves in a lot of the humble neighborhoods, in the humble cities, suburbs area, in order for them to be able to facilitate their manipulation and their in whatever they wanted to do. So once he passes away, then you have another leader, which was, his son. For some reason, out of all the people in the church, because it was huge now, his son became the second leader of the church, which was Samuel. And this is the leader that my mom converted with Samuel. And he did more of the preaching to the internationally wise. He went to Australia, to Europe, even Africa, the Middle East, and expanded a lot in the United States. So his mission was to expand and make the world of that church pretty practically known worldwide. And he passes away out of cancer. And when he passes away in 2014 from cancer, then his son, who is incarcerated right now, accused of charges of abuse and minor sexually assault to minors, and is in prison, sentenced to 16 years and 8 months. His name is Nason Joaquin, and this is the guy that you've probably seen viral and TikToks and news heads, and there's an HBO documentary, A&E documentary, and there's a Netflix series about it. But it is so revealing how this is a generational, pretty much passed on legacy. And you have to keep that legacy within the family because it's a business. It's pretty much a business. The way my life got involved with the family was at the age of 15. My sister was captured by them, and she, at the age of 14, she had to serve every time the apostles, Samuel, will come to Houston or anywhere in Texas. They will ask for her to serve, and she'll be gone for weeks, and then she'll come back. And they paid for her educational. She became the first attorney in Texas. And because she had such a strong tie, she wanted me to become part of that family too. So I was in the choir. I love to sing, and I had just turned 14. In that church, at the age of 14, you get presented instead of 15, like the Catholic churches do. The big quinceañeras en La Luz del Mundo is at 14. That is that age that they determine from your childhood to an adolescent, and now you're not under the spiritual burden of your parents. Now you're gonna be, God's gonna punish you with the way you walk individually now. And at the age of 14, you get presented. So I had just turned 14, and I was going to El Paso, Texas, where there was a huge choir. I was part of the United States Choir, one of the largest choirs in La Luz del Mundo. And we had to practice because the Santa Cena was coming up, and that's the Holy Supper where all the churches all over the world gather and celebrate the Holy Supper, the bread, the wine, to remember, Jesus' sacrifice for us. And when I was in the choir practice, my sister approaches me, and she tells me to step out of the practice. And she takes me to the hotel where we were staying. She puts on one of her dresses, puts on makeup on me, and tells me that I am going to meet the apostle. And as we go back to the church, there's a huge line of members that you have to be very consecrated, very spiritually. It was a blessing to meet the apostle. And when you will meet the apostle, of course, you had to give him an offering. So you had members from all over Texas meeting him that were chosen by their ministers because of their faith. And also that church will give them an offering, a monetary offering, of course. And I was here lined up with my sister side by side. And then I approached the apostle Samuel. And as soon as I try to give him a kiss on the cheek, his grandson is right behind him and whisper something in his ear. And that was the beginning of the first eyesight that the grandson had given me. And we had met very long time ago, but when I was a very young girl, so he didn't pay attention to me. And now I was blossoming into a beautiful teenager. So I caught the eyes of his grandson. And every 4 years, just like presidential elections, well, La Luz del Mundo does clergy. They changed the clergy all over the United States and also internationally. So every 4 years, ministers, whether they're bishops, whether there are deacons, or just missionaries, they get moved depending on the mission that they have in that city. So they get moved every 4 years. So that 4 year, magically, he gets moved to Houston for some reason, and he was being raised by his uncle because his father had a car accident and was paralyzed. So his uncle took full custody of him, so he was being raised with his uncle. So wherever his uncle moved, he would move as well. And in a matter of months, I mean, he arrived on in August, and I can tell you by December, he had already asked me out, and we were talking. Courting in church, you had to do it outside of church where everybody could see you, or you could go to the parents' house if the parents gives you permission. And think about it. I mean, I was only 14, about to be 15, and I had a little crush on someone I was talking to, but my parents disapproved him because of the way he would dress, and because he wasn't had a last name of Prestige, of course. Now, in order to gain prestige in this church, you had to and be part of the elite club. You had to either marry one of these clergy members or bishops, kids, or the royal family. That's what they call them. And their last name was Joaquin. So being part of the Joaquin was like the ultimate goal. It was the blessing. And anytime one of their grandsons or nephews got moved and we knew he was single, well, all the teenagers, of course, were wondering who he was going to date. And even knowing the fact that they had multiple women in every cities, and just to be part of his list was a blessing. And well, he lays eyes on me, and that's where everything begins. The courting, the going to my parents' house, the dropping off letters at my mailbox with his bodyguards at 11 p.m. To the point that my mom got upset. She would disconnect the phone line. So he bought walkie-talkies so we can talk at night still, because literally his house from my house was like 2 blocks. So he bought walkie-talkies and we kept talking. And I was still to this day honor roll student. I am very, very mindset about academic. And I had never skipped school in my life. And he proposes for me to skip school. And I was afraid because I had never done that. And I didn't know what I was going to tell my parents. So I decided to skip school because I didn't want to lose him. And I didn't want him to look at any other girl at that age. I was the chosen one. I didn't want him to, to lose him. So I decided to skip school, and I get in a car where there's other teenagers involved, and we drop them off at at the movie theater to watch movies. And then he took me across the freeway where there was a hotel, and he said, "Oh, we're exchanging." And I'm like, "Who's exchanging what?" And his cousin was already there with his girlfriend, and of course they had already, done it. And I guess it was our turn. But I at that moment didn't think about it. I was just like, and he said to me, "Oh, we're just gonna rest because you woke up early and you need a rest, and I'm gonna go drop them off at the movies, and I'll be back." And I can tell you this, at that moment, You don't think about who to call, or because he literally left me alone for 15, 20 minutes. I could have done so many things in those 20 minutes. Call my mom, call my brother, come and help me. But you're so blinded by the fact that these individuals are prestige in the church, that these individuals are royalty, that if you're with them, your salvation is safe and secure, and especially the burden that it brings to the family. My family was so happy, and they cherished that someone from that family had laid eye on me. I didn't want to cause any, shame upon the family. So I decided to wait. And as I waited, he showed up again, and I was half asleep. And then he started caressing me. And he said, "Well, we're going to get married soon. And why don't you just, prove to me how much you love me, because you're going to be my wife anyway." And that's when my life changed completely. And I told him to stop because it was hurting me. This was my first time I had sexual intercourse, and I didn't appreciate it. I didn't enjoy it. I told him to stop. He covered my mouth as he finished, because I started crying. And I just remember turning around and looking at the wall and let him finish. And my legs were shaking. And then he just said, "Get up and go and wash up, because we have to go pick up everybody else." And as I try to stand up from that bed, my legs were shaking. I could tell you my vision was blurry. I tried to grab myself from the walls, and I just I squatted in the sink in the bathtub, and I turned it on, and I just let the water hit me. And I just kept thinking, what did I do? What had I, the shame that this was going to cause my parents. And I was thinking, oh, they're going to call home, because every time you miss school, the school system will call and let them know you were out. So long story short, we went back to school, dropped me off, but I did tell him that if he didn't see me in church that night, that something had happened. And I got home. We tried to stay on the phone for 2-3 hours. In case that call will come, I could intercept it and received it. But I remember it was a Thursday because it was youth services, and I was in choir, and I had to get ready. And I said, "You know what? It's already 5:30. Church starts at 6. I only have 30 minutes to get ready. So I'm going to hang up, and we'll see each other at church. If you don't see me, something happened." So as soon as I hang up the phone and I walk to the bathroom, the phone rings. And my sister answered it, and of course told my mom I had skipped school, and she just barged in mad and started yelling at me and hitting me, and said I was grounded, that I couldn't go to church. So of course, he doesn't see me. He doesn't see me at church. And he goes up to my mom, and my mom starts screaming at him. And of course, you have bodyguards everywhere he goes. And he's like, "It's okay, it's okay." And he starts telling her, "Look, sister, we went to the movies, and that was it, with other teenagers. We didn't do anything else, and that was it." So when she gets back home, and of course my dad's in the picture now, she starts telling me, "Well, moms know how to get the truth out of you, and they use reverse psychology." And she comes up to me and she said, "I spoke to him in church, and he told me all of the truth." And when she said that, I felt such a relief inside, and I started crying, and I said, "I told him to stop, and he wouldn't stop, and he kept going." And my mom was like, "What? Wait, that's not what he said to me. He said you guys went to the movies. Oh my God, I'm gonna make him pay for this. I'm gonna make sure he doesn't leave you like this, and it's gonna." imagine who's going to want you on pure now. So my mom's focus was my pureness, pretty much. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask how I felt. Her goal was to get paid back and to get justice for taking my virginity away. And before my parents moved to Monterrey, my parents gave a 10-bedroom house, 3 stories in Monterrey, Mexico, to the apostle. So it's like they use that as leverage to say, hey, we came to a country with nothing. We left you and gave you a house. So now you make your grandson, comply with and face his consequences. And the grandfather did force, of course, him to get married with me. So, and my parents forced me. We were both forced. We were both forced to get married. I was 15 at that time, and he was 17 at that time. And my life completely changed because after I find out I'm getting married, I remember my mom picking out a dress. And of course, because I'm not pure anymore, I couldn't wear white or gold or beige. She picked the darkest color that she found, and it was a plum dress. And she was doing my makeup, and she was so happy that she had, what she wanted. But she never questioned, how are you? Or do you want to get married? It's like I was just following my rules. Now, my father, people have asked me, where was your father in the picture? My father was in the picture, but pretty much my mom controlled the household. And since my mom was the one that was in the church longer than my dad would follow whatever my mom would say, pretty much. And I remember getting dressed, going to court, and he didn't arrive. Our time to meet the judge was 8 a.m. and it was 9:30. And after multiple calls and harassment that he received from not just my family members but his own family, he arrived. And I could tell he didn't want to get married. He just did not want to get married. That was not his plan. His plan was just to take my virginity, because who knows how many other girls' virginity he did. And they never forced him to get married. Why was he going to get married now? So, but because of that leverage, that my parents had, so by giving the house, they forced us. And I remember being in the court and the judge having to ask me multiple times the same question, because I was in a daze. I wasn't there. And then finally we leave, and I go to my house. He goes to his house. And my mom receives a phone call from my sister, that attorney that's been there forever and works for them, and just says that I have to pack two suitcases and that I was going to Las Vegas. And that's where everything started. Pretty much my life living with my abuser in Las Vegas, in a city that I did not know, of course. And as a child, I didn't want to leave school. I remember arriving to Las Vegas, and he had an uncle that was a minister in Las Vegas. So he received us there, took us to an empty apartment, and said that we had to furnish it ourselves, that the first month of rent was paid by the church. And they even brought us, as a gesture, some groceries, like how to make sandwiches, of course, like ham, bread, eggs, milk, cereal, like your typical things to survive for a couple of days. But other than that, we were there and by ourselves. And I remember as they left, we both just slept in the floor and grabbed some clothes as sheets. And the next day he said, well, I had sold some jewelry before we came, so we can go buy a bed, even if it's used. And then he got a job at a casino as a dishwasher, his first job. He had never worked. And I continued my school, but it had to be homeschool he would not allow me. And there was a high school right across the apartments, and he would not allow me to attend public school. He didn't want other guys to see me. He would control me to that point that he wouldn't want other guys to see me. So I had to do homeschooling, and I also obtained a job as a cashier across the street at a Wendy's. But he would drop me off and then he would pick me up. I could not walk, even though it was across the street. He had to drop me off and pick me up. So the way he would control everything I would do at that time, I didn't see it. I see it now how controlling it was. And to the point that I didn't even think about, we were just having intercourse now, and we wouldn't protect ourselves. And while I was at work, lifting heavy things, I started heavily bleeding and I had a miscarriage. And he was so upset because he's an only child and he wanted more kids, of course. And after that miscarriage, our marriage just goes downhill because we tried so hard to get pregnant again. He would take me to fertility tests. He would take me to just so much. It was months and years. I was married to him for 3 years. He was unfaithful to me so many times. And I forgave him so many times. And he abused many girls, teenagers as well. And I forgave him so many times. And it was just a routine that you do it this day, you don't do it this day, because it was a planning of fertility, and we wanted to have kids. And his grandparents are all very prestigious hospitals in Mexico. He would even take me with them, and it was just so overwhelming, doctor by doctor by doctor, and I could not conceive or get pregnant. So that throws our marriage down a very, very frustrating burden. And he starts seeing other women and abusing other women, and to the point that he gets mad of me not having kids. So he starts to plan a plan. The only way to get divorced in church is through adultery. And I had forgiven him many times. But I had never committed adultery. So he hires a couple within our church to start seducing me. And we start going like on double dates, and we start going on, everything. It was dinner dates, double dates, shopping dates, show dates. Everything was with this couple. In a matter of 6 months, the wife confesses to me that her husband is very in love with me and that they're going through a lot of marital problems, and that she doesn't care if I'm the lover, pretty much. And she pretty much offered her husband to me. And I was just shocked. And I couldn't believe what was happening. And, I'm a teenager. I was 17 years old at that time, and not being sexually, having intercourse with love. It was just planned. And you miss that want, and you miss those desires, of course. And I had no idea that he had planned it. I found out later on through the phone calls and the phone bills when I received them that he was in constant communication with them for 6 months. He planned this constantly. After we separated and I still get billed the bills, I saw all the transactions. I saw how he withdrew money from the account and left it empty to give our funds to him. And this was just, the burden of me committing adultery with him was the stepping stone of me being shamed for the rest of my life, because it's like I had like a tattoo of like the traditional Scarlet Letter movie. And I was shamed upon church for having committed adultery, especially because it was with the royal family. and they are the top elite, and you hurt the apostles' family, then you hurt the church as well.
Judith, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
After you got married, so your husband at that time was the grandson of the apostle, correct?
Yeah.
So he's royalty. Why was it a punishment that they sent you to Las Vegas? Because I would think that because he's royalty, why didn't they set you up in a beautiful home in Mexico or in Texas and provide for you? Because it sounds like they threw you in an apartment, they paid you 1 month rent, and you had to work as a cashier. Was this a punishment?
Yeah, it was a 1-year punishment that his grandfather had given us. So we would not receive his monthly stipend as usual. So they gave us a spiritual probational period for 1 year for having commit fornication. That's how they put it. And we couldn't practice sing. We couldn't ask any, prayers or anything in church. So that's how they punish you in the Light of the World Church.
But after 1 year, couldn't you return back to?
So after 1 year, I started practically, living the life that's when I said, this is what my parents were fighting for me to be in. I started having bodyguards. We had 3 houses, one in Houston, one in Los Angeles, and one in Guadalajara. And I was dressing with Louis Vuitton, Versace, Prada, Coach.
Okay.
I mean, in these houses were the decor of the houses resembles royalty. I mean, they had molded Versace signs. They had Victorian style furniture. I mean, even the curtains were satin. Everything was decorated to assimilate a royalty status.
Okay. So after 1 year, you left Las Vegas and went back to
Houston. Mm-hmm.
Houston. Okay.
Yeah.
And just to clarify to the audience,
we were able to travel.
Judith, and we know this because we've already done an interview with you, but I just want to clarify to the audience that your husband at the time set you up with this couple. He essentially paid them to seduce you into committing adultery so that he could, through the church, through the rules of the church, divorce you and basically cast you aside. Just to make that clear because I just want to make sure the audience understands that, and right. I want to make sure with you that I'm explaining that correctly.
Correct. And the rules of the church don't see it that way. They see it, of course, as a woman and you committed adultery, of course, you're shamed, and especially because it is in that family. But, even in a legal system, if you are part of the plan, you get incarcerated as well. So he should have been punished as well. There was years that went by, and I had approached so many ministers with the proof of evidence of the phone calls, of the check that he gave the couple, that they actually provided me a copy of it. And I would take all this proof, and they would just keep me silenced because they were afraid of losing their clergy status as well, because it was with the royal family. And so many ministers will hear my story and would inspire me to keep going to church and help in fundraisers or help in other things. But I couldn't pass the sing. I couldn't give a prayer. I couldn't do anything. And they just kept shaming me because of this.
So you actually went through with this other couple. It did happen? You did? Okay.
It did. I did commit adultery, and he did not forgive me. So that's what they would use. Whenever I would question, he's like, well, you forgave him, but he didn't forgive you. So
even though he set you up.
Even though he set me up.
Yeah.
And I want to go back a little bit, Judith, and this is based on the fact that I actually did go and finish watching the HBO documentary on Luz del Mundo a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to ask you if you believe in hindsight or if you just knew it at the time even, but when you say your sister was in service to the apostle, was your sister a victim of abuse in that situation too, or do you believe that now?
I believe so. I
Okay,
do.
so
I
when she would
know she was a
disappear and she
victim of
would go and be gone for days at a time, she was essentially being abused.
correct.
Okay,
Because some of the
I
some of the
just,
questions, yeah, some of the things that she would tell us, I heard the same things on those documentaries. For example, he will ask me to bathe him. Oh, he will ask me to read stories to him right next to his bed, just like those other victims have spoken in those
okay,
documentaries.
yeah, that is
My sister,
exactly why I asked
my
that,
sister,
because yes.
same thing. And she's just so involved, and that, I mean, she's the attorney of Texas. She runs everything, all their legal cases and everything for them here. She is tied to the bone with them, to the point that she has defended them from many cases, civil cases and criminal cases and immigration cases. And when we needed an attorney within our own family, we couldn't ask for her services at all. So we had to hire other attorneys, like for divorces or things like that, because she was not there for us. She's just there for them, and that's it. So of course, I mean, I do know for a fact she was a victim of abuse from some way, and I can tell you other family members and other clergy probably abused her too.
Wow.
Amazing. So, did he ultimately get his divorce
He
from
got it.
you?
Yes. They forced the divorce as well because I did not want to sign the divorce. The divorce document stated we had no property, that we had anything. And of course, we had three houses. But my sister was the one that was like, hey, pray to God that they're not killing you and that they're keeping you alive, because you don't know what these people are capable of doing to you. So just sign in the line, and that's it. And I signed in the line. And immediately 6 months later, he was remarried to um, a young lady that he was unfaithful with me during our marriage in LA.
So they
So,
use
But yeah,
this
spiritual coercion.
organization is like a religious cartel.
they
Yes.
are. They are. They do have connections with cartels. They are very powerful in. They're very powerful in Mexico. Politically, money talks in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Do a lot of political campaigns. There are people that are in high government rankings offices in Mexico that belong to the church. So I can tell you right now, I cannot go to Mexico, of course, after I spoke out about my abuse. And recently, I've spoken out of what happened to my daughter recently. And that's the reason why I decided to leave the church. My daughter was a victim of abuse in 20 since she was 6 years old. But in 2013, we decided to file finally charges, and it took so many years to get the predator and put charges on him. So since my daughter was 6 years old up to 2013, so imagine 2023, not 2013, 2023, she was victim of abuse by a member of the church. We went to the clergy, and now the church has a APS group, Association of Professional Students. You have psychologists, you have professional people that work there, because I was even part of that group. Because of the shaming that they did to me, I decided to focus on academia, and I pursued my bachelor's, my master's, hoping that they would accept me back in the circle of church. Nonetheless, that didn't work out, of course. And when my daughter is a victim of sexually assault for 8 years consecutively, and this individual, instead of being held hostage here and have a trial like anybody else here, the church helps him escape to Mexico, And I can tell you to this point, they are covering him up. We can't find him or we can't locate him. I had many governmental agencies trying to help me with my daughter's case, and they are protecting him. They said we try to locate him and we can't find him. The church is protecting him. So when I saw that they were neglecting my daughter's cries and they were shaming my daughter, and when my daughter started hurting herself because she refused to go to therapy and that was her way of relieving her pain, that's when I decided to step out of the church. And I said, you hurt me for more than 20 years. I'm not going to allow you to do this to my daughter.
Let me ask, so you speak of your daughter. This daughter, who's the father?
The father of my daughter is a member from a church. I had her while I was in college with a member of the church.
So this is after you got divorced.
I got divorced.
Okay.
And I met someone from the church, of course, still, because I would still go to church. And we had a prohibit relationship. And out of that prohibit relationship, my daughter was born. And of course, I'm even shamed more in church for being a single mom and committing fornication again. So they would just brought more shame upon my family. And and the norms of the church, you have to be married to have a daughter, and I was not married. We had a baby. And he is in Costa Rica right now. He keeps in contact with us all the time. But he also was approached by the uncle and forced to leave me as a single mom, because if he didn't leave me, he was going to be shamed in church as well, and that he was not going to be safe in church by staying with me. So after the clergy talks to him, talks to his mom, and talks to the way his salvation is going to be in church if he stays with me, he decides to leave me, and I'm faced being a single mom.
Okay. So who's incarcerated right now? You had mentioned at the beginning.
Nason Joaquin is incarcerated. This is the uncle of my ex-husband. This is his uncle now. And he is the current leader of the church La Luz del Mundo.
So he's running the church from behind bars?
He's running the church from behind bars.
No kidding.
Yeah, just like your typical cartels do.
Yep. I was just thinking that the cartels or the mafia, they can still run it from behind bars. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Not in a good way, obviously, but.
So my focus was getting justice. We're still in the process of getting justice for my daughter. We are working. There's so many agencies involved, but it's a long road, but we're finally starting to see the light. You have the Mexican consulate involved. You have the U.S. Marshals involved. You have senators involved, Department of State involved, district attorneys. So there's so many people involved in my daughter's case. And after my daughter spoke out, we did a protest last year, April, during child abuse awareness right outside La Luz del Mundo, huge, big old church that they have here in Houston, Roman-looking church. And it's so funny that all their churches were built by the members, free labor. Of course, that's what they do. They will work all the members of the church, telling them it's a blessing and it's free labor. So, and they build these huge temples because to them, the temple is it serves as a preacher to invite more souls to come in and hear the word of God. So they will build huge temples. And so we protested last year, and it was my first time wearing jeans. And I put my daughter's hands on my jeans as a symbol of the protest. And I rally with 50 other survivors of La Luz del Mundo who've been human trafficking, who've been sexually assaulted as well. We rally with community activists who help us organize this event last year. And it was all over the news, Spanish news, and also local newspapers as well cover our protest. And Yes, we were bombarded afterwards and harassed because of this protest that we did. But ever since that protest, I can tell you my daughter's been very vocal about
Good.
her abuse. She has helped empower other teenagers. 4 other girls came out. Two of them are victims of the same abuser of my daughter, and they have already pressed charges. So my daughter's abuser has 4 warrants in Harris County, and 2 other members of the church actually have warrants as well of committing sexual abuse to minors here in Texas. And one of them is the choir director. So there's so after we protested, we empowered other people to speak out
Good.
and
That's
making them
amazing.
feel safe. We making them feel safe and making them aware that there is a justice system out there that you have to follow. There's a society out there that is willing to care for you and give you the tools necessary to come out of the cult. I am very happy that I healed through academia. Many other people healed through other things, but I can't tell God, the brain that he gave me helped me so much, and now I understand why he made me like school so much. It's to help other people. I can tell you, I'm pursuing a PhD right now in Hispanic studies. My focus is in Latino studies, and I just obtained this past May my certification in women's studies. And my final project was a refutal paper that I did um, over a scholarly named Patricia de Mola. She published a case study in which she interviewed three generations from the La Luz del Mundo, and she states that there is no shame in this church and that women are free to do whatever they want. So I refuted her paper with my case study of 80 survivors that I interviewed, which shows number one as a mental abuse, sexually abused, of course, depression, sexual assault, and money labor. So I interview 80 survivors, and my refutal is against a survivor that belonged. I'm actually someone that belonged to the church. And this is the first paper that's going to be published in the academia level. And I am so proud that we are doing this and we are showing people what La Luz del Mundo actually is. As born and raised in this church, and I can tell you, does it hurt that my parents don't speak to me? Yes, it hurts. Does it hurt that I walk into a restaurant and my brother's there and he gets up and leaves? Yes, all of my family is still there, but I have hope that someday they will wake up because they know I'm not lying. They've been a witness to what happened to me from day one. And they're thinking, oh, it's because of the way she acts, or it's because of the way she was living her life and that's what happened to her. But no, when you have people opposing these rules to you and marginalizing you, there's no other way. What other way is there to do? I mean, that was the only, you had to follow the rules, and that's it. And that was marginalizing women over anything. So what I have done is I've been very vocal. I go to podcasts that cult survivors do. I empower them with tools necessary, especially focusing with my certification in women's studies, the way women are marginalized and violence in religion through textual, through the text, to biblical texts. That's how they marginalize women. And I just published a book. It's available in Amazon. It's called From Shame to Success. And in the first pages, I list all of the scholarly persons that I read about, theologians that focus a lot on women and violence and religion. And I as well give 18 steps of how to come out of a cult. And I also list resources all over the world, because this church is all over the world, whether you're in Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Australia, Spain, France. There are currently resources out there and institutional of cult survivors. So I list all of those resources, and I also give them a message to don't be afraid to speak out. So not be afraid to speak out.
And you also started your own podcast, correct?
I did. There is a Spotify called Judith Castillo, with tells you the first 6 chapters that are in my book as well.
Excellent. Oh,
And Judith,
Judith, I can't tell you.
Can you
Say again,
clarify,
Melody?
how long have you been out? How long have you been out of the cult?
I've been out exactly, I'm going to tell you, 2 years. I came out.
Okay.
You're 2 years out.
And you have accomplished a lot.
You
But
have
that's
already,
like physically,
yeah,
like physically gone 2 years, but mentally, I can tell you, I've been out mentally for the past 10 years. I was just
That
going
helps.
and going. You don't know where
Yes.
else to go.
yes, especially when you have family members in there. But wow, you are, and I'm so glad that we're redoing this too, because now we can also promote your book and encourage people to go out and take a look at your book, read
Yes.
your book, because between the last time we interviewed you and now, which wasn't that long, what, maybe 6 weeks at most, and now your book is available, so we can we'll definitely be putting that in the show notes to where you can find and purchase
I can
Judith's
tell
book.
you that I can tell you that I had a writer's block, and that book was just sitting there and I couldn't finish it. And just speaking with your podcast and other podcasts, of course, and also getting resources from Hawk, which is Harris County Women's Center, which gives resources, and I'm taking free therapy. My daughter's as well taking free therapy. And it's just deprogramming ourselves from that mental abuse that we were programmed all of our lives. All of these things that I've been doing enable me to pick up where I left off, and I was able to publish this book in a matter of less than 6 weeks.
Excellent. Judith,
Yes.
you are a amazing example of perseverance and strength. And I just can't imagine what you've been through, but you got through it, and you're bringing awareness now to La Iglesia, La Luz del Mundo. I don't suppose we'll ever bring them down. They're too big. But I think they have they have a scar, or they have a mark on them now, that especially
that with more people speaking out, there's more people leaving the church, and they're very hurt with the monetary funds that, of course, we will give every weekly. We had to give our deeds every week, and with all these members coming out, the survey that I did with the cult survivors, it listed that 8 out of 9 people from each household had left the church already. So that's a huge amount of people that are leaving. They're not at the beginning when Nason was in jail. It was individuals coming out, and that was it. But now you are having the whole family coming out recently. So this is a big burden to them. And now who's going to pay for all this? Who's going to pay for the temples? Who's going to pay for their monthly stipend to the clergy members? And now we're having even clergy members leaving the church. Now we have
really,
yes,
yeah,
clergy members leaving the church. I know of a couple that is in Italy, and she's being very vocal and giving testimony of how being in Europe, how the way she was shamed as well and forced to do many things for the apostle. And she's very vocal in these survivor channels. And I would love to invite her to your channel as well, but because she's from Europe and she has a whole different, and being a clergy and part of the high elite clergy, there were different things that you will see. And she has pictures. She has so much evidence that she has shown us.
We would love to have her. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So much evidence, but even clergy members from the church are leaving the church as well. So this just tells you that they were trapped, and they wanted to escape just as much as we wanted to escape as well, because they've been mistreated as well. It's free labor. They've been working for free.
And Judith,
by the way,
And as a mother, I just want to say I so admire you for being your daughter's advocate. And that was the line you would not let them cross. And as a mom, you were like, you were like, no more. That was your line and you were done. They crossed the line that pushed you over the edge, and you stood up for your daughter. And regardless of the brainwashing or anything else you had going on, you knew that that was wrong and you weren't going to tolerate it. And I think that that is amazing. And I'm sure your daughter absolutely loves you for that.
Thank you. I wish my mom would have done that for me, and actually asked me how I felt whenever. And I can sort of understand her. She wanted justice. She wanted my life to be secure. She didn't know everything I was gonna what came afterwards. She just wanted me to be, coming from a large family of 10 people in the household. We would never be able to go to Disneyland. And that was the first trip that I went with the royal family, with everything paid and a private airplane and everything. I mean, she wanted me to live a life that she wouldn't have access to. And,
Right.
with me standing up for my daughter is we're breaking these generation cycles
Yes,
and
absolutely.
being supportive and being there for her. And I am, when it hits something that you really love, that's the awakening call. That is the awakening call. And I couldn't allow them to do this to my daughter.
To the audience, Judith is wearing a T-shirt that says,
It gets better.
"It gets better, Cult Survivor." Did you have that made up, or are they available to purchase?
They're actually available on Amazon. You just put Cold Survivor shirts and
Okay.
I found it, and they're available on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
is this something that you did, or
It was
no?
just
Okay.
there in the market already. Yeah.
I would hope some of the proceeds from that sale go to
To an
helping.
organization,
Yeah. Well,
Well,
and Judith, you gave your daughter what you didn't have, which was a mother to be an advocate, and a little bit defense of your mother. You probably had tools that your mother didn't have. You were from a different generation that your mother wasn't part of, and it allowed you to be the mom that you wanted to have when you were in your daughter's shoes. And it's just inspirational to see that. And
Yeah.
your story is inspirational. Your daughter's story is inspirational. I hope eventually that guy steps foot back in the U.S. and ends up where he needs to be.
That'd be great.
And I hope the other people that are being charged in the church, I mean, I don't know if they're being protected too, but I hope that they pay for their crimes. And I hope some justice comes of all of this, aside from Nassim, because we know that he is not the only one guilty of these crimes.
No.
Thank you guys for covering our story and bringing awareness of this horrifying organization that is still running out there.
No. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And
one last closing will be to don't be afraid to speak out, even if it causes you isolation. There is a network out there of people like this podcast, and there's a network of people willing to help you out. And it's time for you to have a voice and lift your voice and let others, just like I'm lifting my voice and I have helped others. Who knows, with your testimony, you can help another 10 people. And that's what we're here for.
Amazing. I love
Judith,
that.
Again, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you
that.
for coming back on the show. And again, Judith's book will be in the show notes, and go take a look at that. Take a look at Judith's podcast. That will also be a link on that on the show in the show notes for that as well.
Thank you,
Judith. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't thank you enough.
Wow, Andrew, that just an absolutely amazing story of perseverance, and the fact that she is only 2 years out, and she is not only being an advocate for her daughter, but be standing up and being an advocate for other cult survivors in multiple facets of her life. And she's dedicating so much of herself to helping other survivors. It's inspirational.
we've had up until now, we've had quite a few stories from our guests that were, I have often has said to you that I squirmed in the chair just watching them tell their story because it was traumatic. And Judith was no different. She, as I watched her, and again, of course, this is audio only, but there was tears coming out of her eyes. And it was almost, when you're in person, you see somebody maybe in a support group cry, you want to give them a tissue.
Yes.
It was like I wanted to hand her a tissue because I felt her pain. And
absolutely. No, I teared up a little bit at that too, because it was really, when she did it was when we were talking about her daughter. And that was what really hit home to her was, the fact that so somebody was acknowledging that she had been the advocate for her daughter. And I wanted someone to be for her.
And I still I'm going to rant about it, is how law enforcement can't do anything about this. There is a predator living in Mexico. Of course, the other predator is in jail, but
right.
I didn't know he was still running the church from within jail. It doesn't surprise me. Wow. I don't know why they don't go in and just get this guy out of Mexico. It's,
well,
I guess, patience and
he is. Yeah. He's probably in hiding. They're going to have to track him
down. Maybe I watch too many spy movies or black op movies, but there's got to be a way to get in there. And I'm sure somebody knows where he is. Again, maybe I'm tainted by Netflix or
maybe.
And it makes me think that the movie The Sound of Freedom that we watched.
Yes. That was a very good documentary. We'll just mention, since Andrew mentioned it, that it's available on Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah. You have to watch it if you haven't seen it.
It's a true story.
But this is what I'm thinking. It's like, right. But there's a man that goes in and to rescue children that have been. So again, maybe I'm watching too many, but that was a true story. And
it was
a film, but it was it was like a docu-film.
Yes.
So it was acting, but it told the true story. I don't know, maybe I'm just living in a fantasy world, but why can't we send in a black ops team to go in and get this guy? I know it sounds silly.
Right.
Just saying it, but
I just hope that he, like any cockroach, crawls out of his hole and somebody smacks him with a newspaper, so to speak. Yep. It feels like it's inevitable, eventually going to happen, that he'll try to sneak back over the border, do something stupid, because these people usually and get caught. But while we're talking about documentaries, too, I'm also going to drop in there. There are 3 documentaries available specifically on La Luz del Mundo. There's the one on HBO is called Unveiled, subtitled Surviving La Luz del Mundo. The one on Netflix is called just simply The Darkness Within La Luz del Mundo. The one on A&E is called Darkness in the Light of the World. I'm sure I have not seen the A&E one. I've seen the other 2, but I'm sure that one's a good one too. But I highly recommend the HBO one. Was my favorite of all the ones that I did, the 2 that I did see.
Yeah, the only one I saw was the one on Netflix, because I still don't have HBO, and one of these days I will sign up for it, because apparently they are doing many documentaries on cults. Yeah.
They are. Yes.
And
yes, another good one on there. This is our topic, right? Is called Love Is One, and that's actually got a female leader. Which is a kind of a rare story in itself, but it's a very interesting story. In the end, she's taking silver, or she's eating some kind of, I can't remember what it was, some kind of silver, but she literally turns blue before she dies, and they transport her body across state lines, and it's a bizarre story, but very interesting cult story, very unique cult story. Hey, and if anybody's out there that is an ex-member of Love Has Won, we'd love to have you on the show. Reach out to us. cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, please, anybody who's listening, if you have a story to share on either a cult or human trafficking, And of course, you can be anonymous
Yes.
if you choose. We would love to have you, give you the platform to share your story.
100%.
And again, I want to thank Judith.
Oh, for sure. Yes, Judith.
Yeah, I want to thank Judith again. Yeah, and she's very busy in Houston doing a lot of work and bringing awareness to not only her daughter, but to the Luz del Mundo.
Yes.
So just thank you, Judith, so much for making time for us.
Taking the time to come on the show. And we know she had to kind of squeeze us into her schedule, and we greatly appreciate that. So, and thank you to all of you out there for tuning in to Cultimatum. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you could please just take a moment to rate our podcast on platforms like Apple or Spotify. And please don't forget to follow, share, and keep listening to all of our latest episodes.
You can also show your support by joining our Facebook community under the name Cultimatum. If you would like to share your story with us, you can email us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
And for additional support for ex-cult members, you can consider joining the Cult Escape and Recovery group on Facebook.
And if you'd like to, I always feel horrible about saying this, promoting myself, but if you'd like to hear more of me, I have a podcast called Anonymous Andrew Podcast, Life and the Choices We Make. But yeah, thank you for listening. And Melody, thank you for all the work that you do.
Yes, thank you too, Andrew.
All right, we'll talk to everybody next week.
Yes, thank you.